Hey, how's it going, everybody? All right. We'll have a bit of a sensitive topic today. Um, we doing some different things, like I mentioned on here yesterday when I went live. We're gonna be doing some different topics each day throughout the week, and we're just gonna have some things that we're gonna be talking about, some daily topics. So as I mentioned, it's gonna be things like motivational Mondays. It's gonna be tough topic Tuesday, work through it Wednesday, which is today. Where we're talking about working through things or removing things from your life. Throwback Thursday, keeping up with that typical theme, but we're gonna have a little twist with it with past issues and traumas. Then we got Focus Fridays, we got Saturday Wellness, and Sunday Relaxation. Hold on just a minute. I gotta adjust something over here on this end. All right. Okay. So today, as we're waiting on some people to roll in and get started on the chat. And I do want y'all to really chime in on this. I want to hear some feedback, some different perspectives. Just let me know what you think. If you got questions, maybe this is something that you're working with in your particular marriage or relationship. Maybe you're a single parent and you've moved into a relationship with somebody else. I definitely want to hear some feedback and if this is something that you're dealing with yourself. So definitely make sure that you comment, give me some different scenarios, situations, topics, etc., and circumstances that have been unique to your particular life. All right, so I did a post on yesterday. I think it was on Instagram, and I basically said, when you've got a foundation, it starts with two people, and with those two people, it is that's where everything starts, right? That they're the foundation, and it begins with them, and everyone else that comes into that, including children, which is really, really big. This is where it gets tough. This is where it gets sticky. This is where it gets controversial, including children. That's just an addition. So if we continue with that metaphor of a house, right? We got a foundation. And within that foundation, you're going to build on top of that certain thing. So if that foundation isn't strong, the whole thing is going to crumble. The whole thing is going to come down, right? So we take that same concept and we apply that to relationships, right? And I'm talking right now, intimate relationships between two people, right? If you have you and your partner, and whether or not you guys are married really is not applicable. And some people might argue that, and that's where it gets even deeper, is because some people might comment and say things such as, well, if I'm married, I have no issue doing this. And one of the things and the problems with that particular thing, and again, controversial topic, right? And this is something I want to hear your feedback on if you're one of those people. Tell me, at what point do you start to behave as a spouse would? I really want to hear that. That's not a rhetorical. I do want to hear different perspectives, different opinions, and if this is something that is unique to you, definitely let me know. So, at what point do you behave as a spouse? Right? At what point does that change and that transition happen and take place? So, if that is the case, and you're one of those people who say, "Well, at this point, when we get married, then I'll behave as such. I'll act like a spouse. I'll act like a wife. I'll act like a husband." Right? When does that happen? Who decides that? Is that something you guys talked about prior to marriage? What type of things are you doing prior to that? And then where it gets big, again, remember, because at what point do you start behaving that way, right? Well, then what makes you capable, suitable to hold that title, right? So I've always, advocated and been a proponent of, even in my therapy sessions, at some point prior to actually having that title, right, you have to behave as such, right? You have to act as such. You have to do the things that a spouse would do, right? So if your goal is to get married, and not everybody's goal is that, and this is applicable even in intimate relationships outside of the construct of marriage, right? So I want to be really clear on that. This is just an intimate relationship. At some point, if things are serious, right, you have to treat that intimate relationship as it is and as you were married, right? So if we're looking to get married, then at what point do I decide and make that decision with the information and the details and the circumstances of our relationship to give you that particular title or to advance the relationship and propel it into the next step or phase, which would be in this particular case, marriage. So that's something that, again, I want to hear feedback, opinions, etc. on, because there has to be some level or circumstance in which things change, right? In which we behave, act as such. So, all right, next thing is when we get to that phase, then we decide, well, who comes first, right? Who comes first? And in a lot of relationships, I've heard people say, well, my children come first. My children come above anyone ever. Like at no point am I ever going. And the problem with that isn't so much right now, because we're going to get to the fact that, of who actually comes first and why, but to speak with such definitive statements, right? To speak in such absolute certainty as though this is never a possibility that I will change the way that I think and the way that I see these things. And remember, mentality counseling, everything starts with a mentality, right? Our mentality creates the way that we think. The way that we think creates the way that we behave and the way that we act. The way that we act creates our belief systems and our ideologies, right? And then our beliefs create our reality, right? So if we're following along that line and moving through that particular continuum of mentality to our actuality, right, our reality, then we can't speak in such absolute certainty with things. And especially we've got to think about how our partner is hearing that, right? If at no point nobody's ever going to come before my kids, then what that person is hearing is that you're never going to change, so why should I stay? And remember, we were just talking about behaving or acting as such prior to actual moving of that relationship to the next phase, in this case, marriage, right? So if this is how you're behaving in our relationship currently, and you're completely cut off to ever thinking differently, much less acting differently, right? Mentality, thinking, acting, and behavior, right? Belief, reality. Then ultimately you're telling me that my reality, right? My reality is going to be one and where I am always on the back burner. Everything and everyone else, including your kids, your family, etc., which is something else we're going to get into, because who's all inclusive of additions to a relationship, right? Not just children. We're talking friends, right? We're talking siblings, right? We're talking parents, right? We're talking coworkers, right? Oh yeah. We're talking colleagues and coworkers. And then lastly, that number 5 is the actual career itself, which is a big one, because a lot of people don't even see how it doesn't have to be a thing, right? It doesn't have to necessarily be tangible in that way, but it could be career, right? So if these things always come before me, what makes me want to stay? What is my motivator for being in this? What am I getting out of this? Right? Because relationships are supposed to be reciprocal, right? I always say that it's supposed to be reciprocal. Everybody is supposed to be getting something out of that relationship. And if you have two people in a relationship and one person is feeling that they're always giving, but they're never receiving, then at some point that person is going to not only be depleted, right? Because they're giving and giving and giving so freely in that relationship, and they're getting nothing in return to fill their cup back up. The issue there is then we start to develop a resentment in the relationship. And a resentment is oftentimes what I found in a lot of my works with couples is that is one of the main reasons, even though a lot of them don't even realize that in the beginning, but that's one of the main reasons that things move to a point where we start to create doors that are open for infidelity, right? That's how we get there. It's through those resentments. We don't oftentimes want to accept that, but we play a role in infidelity oftentimes. I'm not saying in every case, again, because I don't speak in absolutes, and I don't think that in many circumstances it is fitting of the particular scenario, nor is it appropriate or truthfully so yeah, I steer clear of absolutes. And that's the main reason why. So when we're talking about work through it Wednesdays, right, and we're talking about working or removing yourself from a situation, it is at this point when you have to evaluate whether or not you should work through a situation like this, where you're not coming first in any stretch of the imagination to that person. And if that person is giving you clear certainty, right, clear certainty that they're not going to give you what you're asking, and you're setting a standard, a boundary, and a requirement, which should be done early on in relationships. And I'll actually get to something like that in a later video. But I definitely want you to think about the fact that, hey, this is a standard that I have for my life, right? Is this a non-negotiable for me in the relationship? And if it is a non-negotiable for you in the relationship, and that person is exhibiting those qualities, you need to get out. You need to get out fast. And that's one of those times where you would remove yourself from that situation, and there's no working through it because that person lacks the insight. They lack the acknowledgement to progressively work on themselves and to alter that relationship and to pour into that relationship in a way that manifests productivity, that manifests positivity, and that is effectively doing so. Because oftentimes when we communicate, what I've noticed is that people say, well, communication is key. Communication is key. And that, yeah, I get that. That's somewhat true. However, again, as I stated in one of my previous videos, is that I like context, right? And I think when things lack context, and that's where there's a lot of misconstruing things in these societal norms and these different statements and things that are out there, and quotes and posts and things like that people put out there. So communication is vitally important, right? To actually talk and have dialogue. That is essential to a relationship. However, understanding is key. Comprehension, right, is key. Effectiveness in dialogue is key. So communication encompasses all of those things, right? 2 ears, 1 mouth, right? 2 ears, 1 mouth. You should do more listening, right, than you do talking in any type of dialogue. And this is something I help people in terms of business consulting and consultation. I teach people, how to be more professional, how to articulate themselves and their thoughts clearly and effectively. And when we talk about effective communication, right, effective communication, that is a huge component of effective communication. And that's how to effectively convey what's going on up here, right? If I have a thought, can I articulate that effectively? And if asked for clarification, can I also articulate an alternative way of expressing my thoughts, right? Because you have to have multiple ways to convey the message, because oftentimes, usually, this is very, very common, that you don't communicate the same. And so that is another aspect of a relationship, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you guys aren't compatible. Doesn't necessarily mean that you guys lack connection. It doesn't mean any of those things. But what it does mean is that you guys have two different styles of communication. But to understand the other person's style of communication can increase the effectiveness of what's being conveyed through that dialogue, right? To actually speak is one part of communication, right? To have the dialogue. But to understand and convey that effectively enough for the other person to understand, that is what leads to needs getting met. Now, if you're doing all of that and that person is still saying, you'll never come first, this is where I stand, this is the line in the sand, my kids always come first, my parents always come first, I'll never put my parents away for you, or whatever that looks like. Not even that you're asking that person to do that, obviously, but that's how they're interpreting that. So that person has an issue, right? So that person clearly is conveying to you where they are, how they perceive things, and they're drawing the line in the sand, right? So like I said, that's something that, again, you cannot change in that person. And a lot of times I see that people are trying to change the person instead of, removing themselves from that situation. So work through it Wednesdays, that's what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about whether or not, something is workable, whether it's fixable, whether it's something that can be, reconciled and repairable. But if it's irreparable, then at that point, I would say that's when you remove yourself from the situation. And this is a big topic, and we may even have to have a part 2 with this, due to the fact that, oftentimes, yeah, there are circumstances where people don't see the value in putting their partner first. And I could even go back to the oxygen mask example of an airplane, right? When you're on an airplane, they tell you put your mask on first, right? Because you're useless to another person if you were to faint or pass out from not putting your mask on first or not taking care of you, right? So if we think about it in terms of that, right? We think about it in terms of that, then there goes the example of why you should invest in the relationship and your partner, because a reciprocal action, right? Someone who's willing, right? Someone who's willing to invest back into you, because if you're pouring into their cup and they're pouring back into your cup, nobody ever goes empty. Nobody ever goes empty. The relationship always has, because that person is devoted to the union that is you, right, and them. So that's truthfully why that's so important. So if you guys are pouring into each other, right, and you're pouring into your cups, the children never lack in the first place. I want to be really, really clear about that. If you guys are taking care of one another, the children never lack. Right? So if you have a partner who is willing and not speaking those definitive statements and those absolute comments as to the utmost certainty, guaranteeing you that you'll never come first, you'll never be number one spot in their life, right? Then at that point, right? And I don't want to get into the whole spiritual component of that. People who have their own spiritual beliefs and ideologies. I'm not arguing that, and I'm certainly not comparing that to a higher entity. What I am saying is that we're talking about people, right? So I want to be really clear on that also, because that's another aspect of this argument where people like to take this and that's venturing so far beyond what is actually being said in the context of what we're actually talking about. So I want to be critically clear on my point in this. And we're talking about parents again. We're talking about colleagues, friends, children, career. We're talking about things like that. We're not talking about from a spiritual component, because truthfully, if you guys aren't compatible in that particular area, there's likely going to be conflict on a different level that, again, we've not got the time to necessarily delve into this particularly. And I keep moving, guys, because the phone is trying to time out with the Instagram live portion. So I just keep tapping the screen every now and again to make sure that doesn't happen. For those people who are tuning in on Instagram, they can still continue to see the live. So getting back on track with things, it's really, really essential and critical that you have these types of discussions early on in relationships, especially if you're entering into a relationship where you're not the parent of the other person's child, right? Biologically, if you're not the parent biologically, that's a very, very critical conversation. I'm talking like first date critical. A lot of people don't like to have talks like this on first dates or on dates period, or when they're getting to know people. So when you're going through that quote unquote talking phase, this is one of those things to bring up. I think that a lot of times we've got to be more intentional in the way that we date and the conversations that we have with the people that we date, because a lot of times and oftentimes for those non-negotiable things, and I'll talk through on another video as to what some of those non-negotiable things are and what that list should look like for you. It's something that I work with on my clients, a lot. And it really just gives you a different level of thinking and perspective and mentality when you're going into the dating scene. So if you're a single person, especially a single parent, this is something essentially critical that you have to think about, because these things are again, they are vital to the longevity of the relationship and ultimately your happiness within the relationship. So I think that that's something that truthfully everybody should be having and talking about very, very, very early on. And I'm talking as early as first date, having this conversation. There's nothing wrong with having a conversation like this on the first date. So that truthfully, you guys are clear on not only your intentions, but again, those non-negotiables. Like what is it that I am willing to do and what is it that's not? And if that's something that you aren't willing to do, for me, is that a non-negotiable, right? And vice versa. There may be things on the other person's list that are non-negotiables for them that you partake in or that you'll never partake in. So when we talk about things like religion and family and raising kids is one of them. That's a big one. So if you guys are two people who either already have kids, or you're and looking to combine the house, or you don't have kids at all, that's something very, very important to talk about, is how you wish and hope to foresee that future with your children and prospective families. So yeah, I think that's something that is really, really important, and a lot of people, like I said, don't talk about those types of things. So jumping back over to, again, who comes first, and getting into that whole debate, right? So I just went through an array of different things, and five top things that usually come before the significant other in relationships. And again, that's colleagues, that's friends, that's siblings, that's parents and children. And number six would be career. So six things, truthfully, that shouldn't come before your other person, because when like I said, when you pour into that person's cup, the children never go without. The careers are supported, right? All of those things fall in line under the relationship, right? So pouring into the person, and you guys are pouring into each other, you never lack, right? That's a big thing. So when we were talking about that resentment earlier, we are talking about that lack of happiness earlier. Those things don't have the room to fill the relationship, because guess what? You're pouring into the relationship, and those things are literally benefiting from what the two of you have invested in one another. So that is why it's essential. And another component of that is that, again, to add on to the whole happiness and lack of resentment, and that being removed from the possibilities of things that can create infidelity, etc., right? Or someone just ultimately leaving the relationship, because that happens too. I've dealt with that a lot in my career. People leaving that because they're not being fulfilled and they don't feel like they are valued and come first in the relationship. Happens on both sides. So it's no bias there. But certainly, I've seen it a lot in relationships, and oftentimes the other person can't see why that other person would feel that way, despite them expressing that. So I really want, if this is you, I really want you to think about that. Why is it that I struggle with putting the other person first, and what is it that I gained from not doing so, right? Is it about control? What is it really about? Is it about abandonment? Maybe it's some past trauma that you haven't worked through. Maybe it's something that you haven't reconciled with in your past. And those are the things that we'll talk about on Throwback Thursday. So tune in tomorrow, and we'll talk about some past issues, traumas, and ways to work through that, and what that looks like sometimes when it pops up in relationships, things that are said, etc. So yeah, I look forward to these topics, these daily topics, because truthfully, there are a lot of things that I notice that people excuse me, don't deal with in relationships. They don't talk about them on first dates. They don't talk about them throughout the relationships. And we're talking people who've been together 3, 4, 5 or more years, sometimes have never had these discussions. So then when we get down to it, that's how we have worked through Wednesdays, right? Because these are things that we have never worked through and should have been worked through early on in the relationship. But nonetheless, that doesn't mean that you cannot, get through those things at the current status and stage in the relationship. Maybe you guys are already married. Maybe you guys are thinking about getting married at this point, and this is a point of contention. This is an impasse, a point at which you guys are going different ways, and we're unsure about which way we should go. Sometimes it's creating a new path. Sometimes the path may be unclear, and maybe it's neither of the ways that you guys have thought about, or that you would prefer, but it's an entirely different way, which brings me to why therapy is super, super important. Because not only do you have a third party, not only do you have someone with an introspective point of view, not only do you have someone that is unbiased to the situation and with more experience with dealing with situations like this, but also just someone to kind of run it through with, right? Sometimes when you talk these things out with someone who is professionally equipped to do so, then you get to a point of realization and seeing why you should make the choice that you make, right? I didn't think about it like that. Oh, I never knew he was saying it like that. Oh, I never knew that's what she meant when she stated this, right? So again, we go back to clear, effective communication, right? Being concise with your thoughts, knowing how to articulate those things, and effectively conveying the message, right? Listening to understand the person, not listening to talk or to be heard or to get your point across, right? And at no point should the conversation be that be the goal in the conversation when we're talking about relationships, right? Or truthfully, in many forms of relationships, but certainly in intimate relationships, the goal should never be to win or to get your point heard, right? You want to effectively convey what you're thinking, right, and what you're feeling, but you should be listening and having that dialogue to understand, right? The other person effectively conveying their message and you effectively conveying your message. And if they're trying to understand you and you're trying to understand them, right? If that's happening interchangeably within the two of you, everybody gets understood, everybody gets heard, and everybody is allowed to express what it is that they're feeling and thinking. Therefore, the result is one of positivity and productivity. So positive and productive is the goal, right? To resolve any conversation that you go into with your significant other should be always be to resolve. It should always be one to come to a solution as opposed to focusing on the problem. Focusing on the problem only feeds into it, and I can guarantee you that oftentimes and many times it will end up in discord. So we don't want to be at that impasse again. Remember, if we focus on that, it'll grow. If we focus on negative, it'll grow. So I just wanted to, like I said, chime in on that. If you didn't catch all of the live stream, I certainly want you to go back, check out the live stream on both platforms. If you're not following me, make sure that you follow me, mentality_counseling on Instagram. The YouTube link is in the bio on the Instagram page. And for those of you who follow me on YouTube, make sure that you click that subscribe button and click the notifications. That way you know when I'm going live. Like, comment, subscribe on both platforms. I definitely want to continue to do this for everyone, and I appreciate everyone who always engages and always asks the questions and give me certain topics to talk about. So I really appreciate that. If you see me individually outside of here, whether it be individual or with couples therapy, I certainly appreciate you, and I hope you got your daily dose in between sessions. So I appreciate all of y'all. Have a good evening. And when you get some time, like I said, make sure that you go back, thoroughly examine the video. Think about it. Is this me? Is this something that I can work on? Is this something that I need help with? And most certainly, if there are any questions, pose them. Pose them. I will definitely try to address any and all that I can. But yeah, think about if this is you. Remember, without insight and accountability, it won't work. It won't work because your partner can express things till the cows come home, right? But without you having that introspective point of view to your behavior, to your mentality, right, to your actions, it does no good. Does no good because all you will perceive that as is an attack. And so your walls will go up, you will become defensive, and then ultimately you guys are at war with one another and nothing gets resolved. So remember, it shall always be during those points of contention and disagreements. It's okay to have those, most certainly. I think that it's healthy. So I want to be clear about that it is healthy to have disagreements, and not everything is an argument. So don't perceive it as that. Sometimes when people bring things to your attention, it's merely because they want you to be the person to fix it. So be that person. If your partner is coming to you, it's when they stop coming to you is when you really have the problem. So, introspection, insight, accountability, and make sure that, if this is you, do that work, seek therapy. Reach out to me with any questions, comments, and I'll be more than happy to address some of them. Look forward to hearing from everybody more so, and most certainly I'm always here to help. So I appreciate you for tuning in. I'm going to go and take care of myself. And that's going to be a part of some of that Sunday relaxation. So y'all make sure y'all tune in for that. Think about some things that you want to do for your self-care for this Sunday. I like to get massages. I like to relax, meditate, work out, whatever that may be. But most certainly figure out what that is for you and do it. That's what we're going to be doing on Sunday. So I look forward to it. And like I said, I look forward to hearing more from everybody. Like, comment, subscribe, follow on both platforms so that you never miss a thing. Look forward to hearing from you.